Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going deep on Affinity Hospice LLC.
Oh, interesting.
They're a healthcare provider down in Southern California, and we're using their website and a patient testimonial
Okay.
to figure out if they really live up to their name when it comes to compassionate care. Kind of go beyond just the surface level.
Yeah, I think that's a great approach. I'm always interested in seeing how a company's name and their marketing match up with the actual, delivery of care, especially in a field like this.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's just start right there with that name, Affinity.
Okay.
It definitely brings to mind a sense of connection, of understanding, which you think is intentional, right?
Right. I mean, it's not an accident. I think, especially in hospice and palliative care, that feeling of connection is really important for
Yeah.
families. They're going through a tough time, need to feel like the provider gets them, is there for them.
It's like you need the expertise, the medical side of things, but also that emotional intelligence,
Yeah.
that empathy to really connect.
Yeah. Exactly. And that's something that's hard to put your finger on. You can't really measure it, but it makes a huge difference for families going through serious illness.
Absolutely. Now, on their website, they talk about serving a pretty big chunk of SoCal.
Hmm.
They list Los Angeles, Riverside, San Diego, a bunch of counties. Is it common for hospices to have that kind of reach?
It's worth noting for sure. Providing care, real hospice care across such a big area with different types of people, it takes resources, a network of professionals. You got to have your logistics down pat.
So it could show they have the capacity, the
Yeah.
experience,
Potentially.
but also makes you wonder about maintaining that quality across so many places.
That's the million-dollar question, right? How do you make sure every patient, every family gets that same level of care, no
Mhm.
matter where they are, who they are? It's a real challenge to keep that personal touch when you're operating at that scale.
Right. Now let's dig into their services a little bit.
Yeah.
They've got hospice care, palliative care. They even mention memory care separately.
Mm.
For folks who might not know, what's the main difference between those first two, hospice versus palliative?
Sure. So both are focused on comfort and quality of life for people dealing with serious illnesses, but the timing and the goals are different. Hospice is typically for people with a terminal illness where life expectancy is, 6 months or less. The focus shifts from trying to cure to managing symptoms, providing emotional and spiritual support during those final stages.
So more about making the patient as comfortable as possible,
Exact.
supporting their families during a very difficult time.
Yeah. Now, palliative care, you can have that alongside curative treatments, really at any stage of a serious illness.
Okay.
The goal there is to alleviate pain, improve quality of life, help patients and families make those tough decisions.
So while both are about comfort and support,
Yeah.
hospice is more specific for like end-of-life care,
Mm-hmm.
and palliative can be used much earlier.
Precisely. And I think Affinity highlighting memory care separately is interesting. It speaks to the growing need, especially in a place like Southern California with a lot of older adults.
Yeah, it's like they're specializing within a specialty. Right?
Exactly. They're recognizing those trends and adapting.
Now, one thing that really pops out from their website is this emphasis on 24/7 availability.
Yeah, I noticed that.
They give a phone number, and they even say, hey, text us too. Why is that so important in this field?
Well, I think peace of mind is huge in hospice and palliative care for both patients and families. Knowing that you can reach someone anytime, day or night, a compassionate professional, it really takes the edge off. Imagine, it's the middle of the night, your loved one's in pain.
Right.
Being able to just send a quick text and get reassurance or advice, it can be a lifesaver.
It makes you feel like you're not alone, like you've got backup.
Exactly. It builds trust, gives a sense of security, especially when families are already feeling so vulnerable.
Okay. And they outline 6 pillars of their approach: comprehensive care, compassionate team, patient-centered, quality and compliance, ethical practices, and support for families.
Right. They lay it all out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, they all sound good, but the one that really grabs me is that last one, that support for families. Why is that so crucial in this field?
I think you're onto something there. Support for families isn't just a nice thing to do, it's essential.
Hmm.
Affinity seems to get that, making it a core part of their philosophy. You got to remember, serious illness, it affects the whole family.
Right. It ripples outwards.
Exactly. Spouses, children, siblings, close friends, they're all impacted emotionally, practically.
It's almost like they become secondary patients, carrying all that weight.
That's a good way to put it. And that's where having a strong support system makes all the difference. Counseling, support groups, even just someone to listen.
And research shows that when families are supported, The patient's well-being often improves too, right?
Absolutely. It's like a positive feedback loop. When families feel empowered, they're better caregivers, and that helps the patient.
So it's not just being nice, it's recognizing that everyone's well-being is connected.
Exactly. And that's what makes Affinity's focus on family support so important. They seem to understand that link.
Now, their website features this testimonial from a woman named Anna Garcia, and she really praises the staff's responsiveness and compassion when her mother had to be moved to a different facility.
Very moving story.
Yeah, she even calls out specific staff members by name. What do you think about the power of that kind of testimonial in this field?
Those personal stories, they're incredibly powerful. When people are facing tough choices, they want to hear from others who've been there, who've experienced that care firsthand.
It's more than just slogans. It's real people sharing real experiences, which builds trust.
Absolutely. And Anna mentioning specific staff, praising their kindness, it makes it real, personal. It's not just some faceless company.
Humanizes the whole thing. Makes hospice seem less scary. Now, switching gears a bit, I saw their website is designed with WordPress. Does that tell us anything useful about Affinity?
Honestly, WordPress is everywhere these days, even in healthcare. It's easy to use, flexible, affordable. I wouldn't read too much into it.
Okay, so not a red flag, not a gold star, just a neutral observation.
Pretty much.
But then there's this section that feels kind of tacked on. Short on medical supplies. Meals on Wheels program. Inquire now.
All right.
What's that about? Is it typical for hospice providers to offer these extra services?
That's interesting. It suggests they're going beyond the usual hospice care, recognizing that families need help with practical stuff, too.
Right, like the day-to-day things.
Exactly. Medical supplies, meals, transportation. By offering those things, they're trying to create a more complete support system for families.
It could be a good thing, being proactive.
But it also makes you wonder if they're spreading themselves too thin. Could focusing on those extras take away from their main job, which is providing quality hospice care?
Yeah, it's a balancing act.
Absolutely.
Well, we've covered a lot in this first part of our deep dive into Affinity Hospice, LLC. They seem to be hitting a lot of the right notes. When it comes to compassionate care, the name, the emphasis on family support, that positive testimonial.
They're definitely putting the effort in.
But, as you pointed out, there are some potential questions and challenges too.
Right, and that's what makes this so interesting. We're peeling back the layers to see what's really going on.
Exactly. And in the next part, we'll dig deeper into that, exploring their holistic care model, how they integrate emotional, spiritual, and social support into their services. So stay tuned for more insights on Affinity Hospice, LLC.
Looking forward to it.
So we're back, continuing our deep dive into Affinity Hospice, LLC. Last time we talked about their commitment to support for families, like it's a big deal for them.
Yeah.
But how does a hospice actually make good on that promise? What does it look like in action?
Well, that's the key, isn't it? Anyone can have a slogan, right? But putting it into practice, that's where it gets real. From my experience, effective family support, it's got to go way beyond just, handing them a pamphlet or offering a shoulder to cry on.
So what does it actually look like?
It starts with recognizing that each family is different. Different dynamics, different challenges, different needs. A good hospice will do a thorough assessment, figure out the family situation, their strengths, their weaknesses.
So no cookie-cutter solutions, it's all individualized.
Exactly. Then it's about providing a range of services, resources that match those needs. Could be counseling for family members. Maybe they're dealing with grief or caregiver burnout. Support groups so they can connect with others going through similar things. Even financial guidance, because healthcare costs, insurance, that can be a whole other headache.
Yeah, that financial side, it often gets overlooked, but it adds so much stress.
Absolutely. And it's not just about giving them information. It's about being an advocate, helping them navigate the system, access resources. A good provider will have staff who are trained in all that, ready to offer that kind of support.
So having dedicated staff for that family support, it's essential.
If they're serious about it, yeah, absolutely. It's an investment, but it pays off in the quality of care for everyone involved.
Now, you mentioned before that Affinity covers this big, diverse region in Southern California. How do they ensure that same level of care across all those different communities? That seems tricky.
It's a huge challenge for sure. You need a multi-pronged approach, I'd say. First off, you got to have strong leadership, a clear vision that prioritizes quality and consistency. And that vision, it has to translate into procedures, protocols, Everyone on the team, from nurses to social workers to volunteers, they're all on the same page, using the same playbook, so to speak.
So it's not just about hiring good people, it's about having systems in place that keep everyone on track.
Right. And those systems, they can't be static. They need to be reviewed, updated to meet the changing needs of the communities. Another crucial part is ongoing training, professional development for the staff. Hospice and palliative care are constantly evolving, new research, best practices. You got to keep up.
So there's a lot going on behind the scenes to make that experience smooth for patients and families.
You bet. And it's often those things you don't see that make the biggest impact.
Okay, so we talked about their website being designed with WordPress, which you said is pretty standard. But could they have done something different with the website, something that reflects that compassion they keep talking about?
That's a good point. Yeah, I think there are definitely ways they could have made the website more, I don't know, emotionally engaging. Not just listing services and contact info, but something with more heart.
Give me some examples. What could they have done?
Well, they could use more visuals, tell stories with pictures and videos, show the actual people involved, nurses, social workers, volunteers. Most importantly, the patients and families. Let those stories shine through.
So show the human side, not just the clinical side.
Right. They could have also highlighted their community involvement, partnerships with other organizations. Show they're not just about business, they care about the community.
It builds trust, transparency.
Exactly. And maybe some interactive elements like quizzes or self-assessment tools help families figure out what they need and connect them with the right resources.
So more than just a static website, but something that's actually helpful for people going through a difficult time.
That's the idea, using technology in a way that enhances the human connection.
Now, we've focused a lot on this support for families, but what about the patient's experience? We have Anna Garcia's story, which is great, but is there a way to get a broader sense of what it's like to be under Affinity's care?
That's where going beyond their own website is key. You can check online reviews, patient forums, even local news articles. It paints a bigger picture.
So, gotta do a little digging.
Exactly. Of course, take online reviews with a grain of salt. They can be biased, but if you look at the overall patterns, it can be revealing.
Look for the trends, not just one-off complaints.
Right. The goal is to get a well-rounded perspective.
And speaking of different perspectives, you mentioned before they offer both hospice and palliative care. Does their approach to palliative care tell us anything about their overall philosophy, their quality of care?
Absolutely. Remember, palliative care can start much earlier in the illness, even while someone's still getting treatments aimed at curing them. So their palliative care team is interacting with people at a very different stage, folks who are maybe facing some really tough decisions about their future.
So it's a whole different emotional landscape than end-of-life care.
Absolutely. And how Affinity handles that, it says a lot about their commitment to patient-centered care.
Yeah.
How well they support people during those difficult times.
It's a glimpse into their overall approach.
Exactly. And it might also highlight areas where they could improve, expand their services to better meet the needs of those folks earlier in their journey.
So we're not just looking at hospice care in isolation, but as part of a bigger continuum of care.
Precisely. Taking a holistic view, seeing how it all fits together.
Now, before we move on, there's this big elephant in the room when it comes to healthcare cost and insurance. It's a huge factor for families considering hospice, but Affinity's website doesn't say a word about it.
You're right. It's a glaring omission. Makes you wonder about their transparency, how committed they are to helping families navigate the financial side of things.
I mean, I get it. They don't want to scare people off with numbers right away.
Right.
But dodging the topic completely, it almost feels like they're hiding something.
It can erode trust, for sure, especially when families are already feeling vulnerable. Hospice providers need to be upfront about costs, insurance coverage, financial assistance programs.
It's about giving people the information they need to make informed choices.
Exactly. Transparency builds trust. It shows they're not just about profit. They genuinely want to support families through this whole process.
So it's more than just providing care. It's about removing barriers, giving people peace of mind.
Absolutely. Compassionate care means taking care of the whole person, and that includes the practical and financial aspects.
Well, it seems we've uncovered another layer of complexity in this deep dive into Affinity Hospice LLC. That silence on the financial side, it raises some flags about their transparency, their commitment to truly being there for families.
It does. It's a reminder that even the best providers can have blind spots. Families need to do their research, ask the tough questions.
Don't be afraid to push for those answers.
Absolutely.
And in the final part of our deep dive, we'll continue exploring these nuances. We'll look at their approach to holistic care, how they integrate emotional, spiritual, and social support into their services. So stay with us for more on Affinity Hospice LLC. Welcome back to the show, everybody. We're wrapping up our deep dive into Affinity Hospice LLC. We've been checking out their website, reading a patient testimonial, really trying to see if they walk the walk when it comes to this compassionate care they talk about. So far, we've seen some good things, big emphasis on family support. They cover a lot of ground in Southern California. But we've also raised some questions like, why don't they talk about costs on their website? Kind of a big deal, right?
Yeah, definitely something to consider.
Now, I want to shift gears a bit and look at their approach to holistic care. They mention it a lot on their site. But what does that actually mean in practice? How do they go beyond just the medical stuff?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Holistic is one of those words you hear everywhere, but in this context, in hospice and palliative care, I think it's really important. It means you're caring for the whole person, not just their illness. We're talking about their physical symptoms, sure, but also emotional, spiritual, social needs. It's all connected.
Recognizing that a person is more than just their diagnosis.
Exactly. They have a life, relationships, beliefs, values. All those things shape how they experience being sick. And when you're dealing with end-of-life issues, like you often are in hospice, this holistic approach becomes even more crucial.
Because it's not just about keeping someone alive longer. It's about making that time meaningful.
Exactly. Helping them find peace, connect with loved ones, tie up any loose ends that might be weighing on them.
Now, one thing I noticed on their website, they have chaplains on staff. You don't see that everywhere. How does that spiritual care piece fit into this whole holistic approach?
I think it's significant. It shows they recognize that for many people, faith and spirituality are really important, especially when they're facing serious illness, end of life. Having a chaplain there to provide support, guidance, it can be incredibly valuable.
And it's not just for people who are religious, right?
Right. It's about those big questions we all have, the meaning of life, what happens after death. Those things come up a lot when someone is facing a serious illness, regardless of their beliefs.
And it's another layer of support for the family too, right?
Absolutely. Families are going through their own spiritual struggles often, especially when a loved one is dying. The chaplain can be a source of comfort, guidance for them as well.
I bet it's helpful for families who come from different backgrounds, different beliefs about death and dying.
Oh, for sure. The chaplain can help bridge those differences, find common ground.
So it's not just about comfort, it's about communication, understanding within the family.
Exactly. Creating a safe space for everyone to feel heard, supported.
Okay. Besides the spiritual care, their website also mentions social workers, volunteers who provide emotional support and resources. What are some examples of what that might look like?
Well, it can be practical things like connecting families with transportation or meal delivery services, but also emotional support like counseling, grief support groups, maybe art therapy or music therapy.
So, meeting a wide range of needs, taking some of the burden off families.
Right. And it's not just about having a list of services. It's about being attuned to each family's specific needs.
Ah.
A good social worker, they'll build a relationship with the family, understand their strengths, and connect them with the right resources.
It's that personalized touch, which is so important when you're feeling overwhelmed.
Absolutely. And it makes me think back to Anna Garcia's testimonial where she praised the staff's responsiveness when her mom needed to move. Maybe it wasn't just about efficiency, but also about recognizing the emotional impact of that situation and responding with compassion.
Yeah, good point. It's about realizing that behind every logistical challenge, there's a family going through something really tough.
Right. And sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is just listen, offer support, a kind word.
So as we wrap up our deep dives into Affinity Hospice LLC, it seems like they're making a real effort to provide this holistic care for the patient and the family. They're big on family support, they offer spiritual care, and they have those social workers and volunteers providing a whole range of resources.
They're definitely putting in the work. And while we've pointed out some areas where they could improve, like being more upfront about costs and maybe spicing up their website a bit, their commitment to holistic care is definitely a good sign.
It shows they're thinking beyond just the medical side of things, trying to create a more human-centered approach to care.
Exactly. And for our listeners out there, I think the takeaway is this. When you're choosing a hospice provider, don't just look at the services they offer or their staff's credentials. Look deeper.
Right.
What's their philosophy? Do their values align with yours? Choosing hospice, it's a big decision. It's a personal decision. So take your time, ask the tough questions, find the right fit for you and your family.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Affinity Hospice LLC. We'll see you next time for another insightful exploration of healthcare providers.